Let me take you back to Interstate 85. A truck driver named Cain Hammock was behind the wheel when something went terribly wrong. His truck collided with a van. The result was devastating. 8 people lost their lives in that single collision. Now, I know truck accidents happen, we see them on the news, but what made this case different wasn't just the tragedy, it was what came next. Hey everyone, welcome back to Young Diesel Trucking Reacts. I'm your host, and today we're diving into something that's been keeping a lot of you guys up at night in the trucking community. This isn't just another industry story. This is about safety, jobs, and the future of American trucking. And honestly, what I'm about to tell you might shock you. 8 people are dead. One crash on Interstate 85, and the truck driver responsible walked out on bond. But here's where it gets really interesting and frankly, really concerning. The conversation this crash sparked is now shaping federal policy that could change everything about how truck drivers get licensed in this country.
Guys, you ever been stuck and stranded in a rest area or anywhere out here in this trucking world and you need a boost? This right here, the best thing on the market. Link in the description box below. This is the NOCO boost to help you guys charge up your batteries on the go. This is just like any jumper starter. I sit mine right here. Boom. Red goes with red, black goes with black. So right then, guys, press the red button. Boom. See how that red light popped up? Now it's ready to charge. That light stays on for at least 60 seconds to charge. You turn the key. There we go, guys, man. NOCO boost. Link down in the description box below.
Let me take you back to Interstate 85. A truck driver named Cain Hammock was behind the wheel when something went terribly wrong. His truck collided with a van. The result was devastating. 8 people lost their lives in that single collision. Now, I know truck accidents happen, we see them on the news, but what made this case different wasn't just the tragedy, it was what came next. Hammock was charged with vehicular manslaughter and multiple traffic violations. The truck he was driving was unregistered. So you'd think this would mean serious prison time, right? Here's the part that's got the trucking community fired up. He was released on bond. Released. After killing 8 people and driving an unregistered vehicle, the severity of those charges didn't stop him from walking out. That alone tells you something about how our system is handling this stuff. But the real story isn't just about one driver or one crash, it's about what this crash exposed, and that's the messy underbelly of commercial driver licensing in this country. The thing is, most of you watching already know there's a problem. You see it every single day on the road. You see trucks being operated by drivers who you question whether they should even have a license. The Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, came out swinging after this incident, and his focus wasn't just on prosecuting Hammock, it was on a much bigger problem. He started pushing hard for the removal of illegal foreign truck drivers from U.S. roads, and suddenly the conversation shifted from one crash to an entire system that's broken. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, language proficiency. Now, before you click away thinking this is political, hear me out, because this is actually about something very fundamental to safety. Think about your last day on the road. You're driving an 80,000-pound vehicle at 65 miles per hour. You see a sign that says bridge clearance 13 feet 4 inches. You need to shippers, receivers, and other drivers, all in English. Here's the uncomfortable truth that the trucking industry is grappling with right now. 27 states in this country allow the written CDL test to be administered in languages other than English. 27 states. That means a driver could pass their CDL exam in Spanish, Mandarin, Vietnamese, or a dozen other languages, but once they're on the road, they're dealing with signage, regulations, and emergency situations entirely in English. Does that make sense to you? Because it doesn't make sense to a lot of people in Congress either, and now they're doing something about it. In 2025, a bipartisan group of lawmakers introduced the Secure Commercial Driver's License Act, and this is where things get real for anyone holding a CDL or thinking about getting one. The bill's main objective is crystal clear: require all CDL tests to be administered exclusively in English. But it doesn't stop there. The proposed legislation includes some pretty significant changes to how we license commercial drivers. First, drivers would need to have a regular driver's license for at least 1 year before they can even apply for a CDL. 1 year minimum. That's a gatekeeping measure designed to ensure drivers have basic road experience before they get behind the wheel of a big rig. The bill also includes teeth, real enforcement teeth. States that don't comply with these federal CDL requirements face penalties. We're talking about withholding federal highway funding. That's serious leverage because every state depends on federal transportation dollars. So when Congress says comply or lose funding, states listen. Now, why does this matter to you? Because the standard by which truck drivers are licensed affects the entire market. It affects insurance rates, accident statistics, freight rates, and ultimately, it affects your job security and your earning potential as a professional driver. Think about it this way. If licensing standards are weak, the market gets flooded with poorly qualified drivers. That drives down rates across the board. Companies desperate for qualified drivers start cutting corners on maintenance, hours of service, and safety protocols. Your safety suffers, your paycheck suffers, and your industry suffers. Conversely, if we tighten licensing standards and ensure every driver on the road has genuinely met rigorous requirements, including English proficiency, the market changes. You've got fewer unqualified drivers on the road. That actually strengthens the trucking industry because the barrier to entry becomes legitimate competency, not just passing a test in your preferred language. Now, we need to talk about something that's directly connected to this, but also politically charged, and I want to be thoughtful here. The Secretary of Transportation has been pushing hard on removing illegal foreign truck drivers from U.S. roads. This isn't just about language, it's about illegal labor. Here's the economic reality that a lot of American truckers are living with right now. When illegal or undocumented foreign drivers are operating in the U.S., they're often willing to work for significantly less money than American drivers. They're often working longer hours, taking on greater risk, and operating under less scrutiny. Legitimate American trucking companies that follow all the rules, pay all the taxes, and maintain all the safety standards can't compete with freight brokers who hire drivers at a fraction of the cost. The result is brutal for legitimate trucking operations. Some small owner-operators have been forced out of business because they simply couldn't compete on price when competing against fleets running on illegal labor. That's not free market competition. That's market distortion, and it's hurting American truckers. Sean Duffy has been clear about this. The federal government is increasing enforcement against illegal foreign drivers, more inspections at border crossings, tougher penalties for companies that hire them, and better coordination between ICE and DOT. Now, some states, particularly California, have resisted these measures, citing inclusivity and immigration policy concerns, but the federal government has pushed back. The argument from Washington is straightforward: safety and rule of law come first. States cannot create de facto sanctuary policies for drivers operating illegally on federal highways. This is where it gets complicated because you've got state priorities clashing with federal priorities, and in that clash, American truckers and American trucking companies are caught in the middle. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine you're an owner-operator. You own 2 trucks. You've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment. You follow every regulation. Your drivers are trained. Your trucks are maintained. You're paying proper wages and taxes. Now imagine your competitor down the road is hauling freight for 30% less per load. How? Because they're running cheaper drivers who are working under the table, living in trucks, and taking routes that cut corners on safety. You can't compete. You can't undercut them without destroying your business. So what do? This scenario is happening right now in American trucking. And it's not theoretical. It's real. Trucking companies are going under because they can't compete with illegal labor practices. Legitimate drivers are watching their rates get undercut, and the highways are becoming more dangerous because there's less enforcement of safety standards on the illegal side of the market. The I-85 crash that killed 8 people didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened in an environment where trucking standards have been eroded, where the barrier to entry has become so low that almost anyone can get a truck on the road, where companies have every incentive to cut corners because the market is being flooded with ultra-cheap, barely regulated labor. The Secure CDL Act is designed to start fixing this by tightening language requirements, by extending the licensing timeline, and by empowering federal enforcement. Congress is trying to rebuild the integrity of the CDL system. But here's what a lot of industry insiders are saying. Even if this bill passes, even if CDLs are now English only, the real problem is enforcement, and enforcement is expensive. It requires coordination between federal agencies, state agencies, and private companies. It requires dedication and resources, and so far we haven't seen that level of commitment. I've been looking at what people inside the trucking industry are saying about this, and the sentiment is mixed, which is interesting. Some drivers and fleet owners are fully behind the Secure CDL Act. They see it as a necessary measure to restore professional standards to an industry that's been degraded by cheap labor flooding the market. Other voices in trucking are saying this doesn't go far enough. They want mandatory drug testing regardless of language. They want stricter vehicle inspection standards. They want better enforcement of hours of service violations. They want action on brokers who deliberately hire undocumented drivers to cut costs. And then there are voices saying we shouldn't stigmatize immigrants or create protectionist barriers. They argue the real issue is economic. If trucking jobs paid better and companies operated under stricter oversight, the illegal labor problem would diminish naturally. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Language proficiency matters. It's a legitimate safety concern, but it's also one piece of a much larger puzzle. You can have English-only CDL tests, but if there's no enforcement, if states aren't checking whether drivers actually meet the requirements, if companies aren't held accountable for hiring unqualified drivers, then nothing really changes. I want to take a step back here and acknowledge something. The people driving trucks across this country are diverse. We've got Americans who've been in this industry for 30 years. We've got immigrants who came here legally, got their documentation, got their licenses the right way, and are contributing to this economy and industry. We've got owner-operators who are fighting to keep their businesses alive. We've got mega carriers with thousands of trucks and thousands of employees. The issue isn't about demonizing any group. The issue is about maintaining standards. It's about safety. It's about fair competition. It's about protecting an industry that's essential to this entire country's economy. I read somewhere that rapper Waka Flocka Flame owns a trucking company. And that's kind of cool because it shows that trucking intersects with different parts of American culture. It shows that this industry has potential to attract people from all walks of life, but they need to come in through the front door. They need to meet the same standards. They need to get the proper licenses. The Secure CDL Act is basically saying we're going to make sure everyone comes through that front door. No shortcuts, no test in a different language. Meet the standard or don't get the license. Now, let's talk about whether this bill actually becomes law. Because, introducing a bill is one thing. Getting it passed, signed by the president, and implemented is another. The Secure CDL Act is bipartisan. That's significant. When you get Democrats and Republicans agreeing that something needs to be done, it usually means the pressure is building. The I-85 crash generated headlines. National news picked it up. 8 people dead. That's hard to ignore. That's what gets Congress to act. But here's where it gets tricky. Implementation of these new requirements would fall on states, and states have different priorities. Some states are enthusiastic about tightening CDL standards. Other states see it as federal overreach. Some states have significant populations of non-English speakers and worry about the fairness implications of English-only testing. That's where the federal penalty mechanism comes in. The bill includes provisions to withhold highway funding from states that don't comply. That's heavy leverage, but it's also controversial. It's using the federal purse to force state compliance on what some states view as a state responsibility. Will it work? Historically, when Congress ties federal funding to compliance, states usually fall in line. The example that gets cited all the time is the national 55-mile-per-hour speed limit that was federally mandated through highway funding. States didn't want it, but they complied because they couldn't afford to lose highway money. The Secure CDL Act would likely follow a similar pattern. Uncomfortable, controversial, but ultimately effective at changing state behavior. If the Secure CDL Act passes, here's what changes. First, from this point forward, all CDL written tests would be administered in English only. Drivers currently holding CDLs would not be affected, but new drivers coming into the system would face this requirement. Second, the 1 year holding a regular driver's license requirement would kick in. So if you want your CDL, you can't just get both at the same time. You've got to have a regular license for a year first. That might seem like a small thing, but it actually ensures drivers have at least a year of basic driving experience before they're operating a 36,000-pound vehicle. States would need to verify compliance or face funding penalties, so you'd expect to see more rigorous state oversight of CDL testing and licensing, more state resources dedicated to enforcement, better tracking of which drivers actually meet the requirements. Fourth, the federal government would increase enforcement efforts against illegal foreign drivers, more inspections, more penalties for companies that hire them, more coordination with immigration authorities. But here's the thing you need to understand. Even if all of this happens, the problem doesn't disappear overnight. If anything, it gets worse before it gets better. Because if enforcement tightens and suddenly a lot of drivers can't get CDLs, we're going to have a shortage of truck drivers. Rates could go up, prices could go up, shippers could see delays. That's actually how policy change works in the real world. You identify a problem, you pass a law to fix it. The law causes disruption in the short term, but you're supposed to be fixing a problem, so some disruption is part of the deal. Step back with me for a second. What we're really talking about here is the future of American trucking. Are we going to maintain professional standards? Are we going to require legitimate licensing? Are we going to enforce the rules? Or are we going to accept a system where the barrier to entry is so low that almost anyone can get a truck on the road, where companies are incentivized to cut corners because the market is flooded with cheap labor, where safety standards erode because there's competition on price but not on quality? The Secure CDL Act is taking a stance. It's saying professional standards matter, English proficiency matters, legitimate licensing matters, and if you don't meet those standards, you don't get a CDL, you don't drive a truck in this country. Whether you think that's the right call or not, the bill represents a significant shift in thinking at the federal level. For a long time, the trucking industry has been allowed to operate pretty loosely. Licensing standards have been minimal, enforcement has been sporadic, and the result is an industry that's profitable but fractured. Profitable for some mega carriers and freight brokers, but hard on American truckers trying to make a living following the rules. If you're watching this and you're a truck driver, this affects you. The standards we set for licensing affect you. If they're too low, the market gets flooded with cheap labor and your rates go down. If they're properly enforced, you've got a more professional industry where your skills and experience are valued. If you own a trucking company, this affects you. If you've been trying to compete with companies that cut corners, tighter standards could actually help you level the playing field. If you're thinking about getting into trucking, this affects you. The barrier to entry might go up. But that also means when you get your CDL, it means something. It means you meet a real standard. Your license is valuable. Your position in the market is more secure. The thing about professional standards is they protect everyone. They protect you from incompetent drivers on the road next to you. They protect your livelihood by maintaining the integrity of your profession. They protect the public by ensuring trained, qualified people are operating 80,000-pound vehicles. So let me wrap this up. 8 people died on Interstate 85. That's a tragedy. But it's also a catalyst. It sparked a conversation that's now reshaping federal policy on trucking. The Secure Commercial Driver's License Act is a direct response to that crash and to years of concern about declining standards in the industry. The bill is imperfect. No piece of legislation is perfect, but it represents a serious attempt to tighten professional standards. It's trying to rebuild the integrity of the CDL system, and it has real support from Congress. Whether it becomes law and whether it actually changes anything on the ground remains to be seen. Enforcement is always the hard part, but the direction is clear. Congress is moving towards stricter standards for commercial drivers. As someone in the trucking industry or someone who cares about trucking, you need to pay attention to this, because what happens in the next 2 to 3 years is going to shape trucking for the next decade. I want to hear from you. What do you think? Do you support stricter CDL requirements? Do you think language proficiency matters? Are you concerned about illegal drivers on the road? Or do you think this is overreach? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all, and I want to know what you're thinking. If you found this breakdown helpful, please like and subscribe. We're hitting 20,000 subscribers soon, and I really appreciate everyone who's part of this community. You guys are the reason I make these videos.